The jungle moon's air tasted of ash and ozone, a bitter reminder of the orbital bombardment that had scorched half the surface 3 days ago. Recon Sergeant Kieran Vale moved through the blackened undergrowth with practiced silence, his rifles targeting system painting thermal signatures across his visor. Somewhere ahead, his quarry waited. Intelligence had been sparse but urgent. A Zalari operative, designation Vyatia, had broken from the main evacuation fleet. High-value target. Possible insurgent leader. Eliminate on sight. Kieran paused beside a twisted metal sculpture that had once been a tree, scanning the ruins of what appeared to be an ancient temple complex. The stone structures had weathered the bombardment better than the surrounding forest, their carved facades now serving as perfect hiding spots for desperate fugitives. A flash of movement caught his eye, pale purple skin disappearing behind a collapsed archway. Kieran's finger moved to his trigger as he approached, boots crunching softly on scattered debris. The tactical display showed elevated life signs just beyond the rubble. "Come out slowly," he called in accented Zalari, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Weapons down, silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant crackling of still-burning vegetation. Then, from behind the fallen stones, came a voice musical despite its tremor. I have no weapons left to lower." Kieran rounded the corner, rifle raised, and stopped. The figure before him was not the hardened insurgent he'd expected. Vyatia knelt against a broken pillar, her pale purple skin marked with cuts and bruises that stood out like dark flowers. Against her ethereal complexion, her dark curly hair was matted with dust and dried blood, framing a face that spoke of nobility even in defeat. She raised her arms slowly, trembling hands open toward him. Her breathing was ragged, each exhale leaving small clouds in the cooling air. "Please," she whispered, her large eyes meeting his. Through his visor, "Make it quick." For a moment, Kieran's training warred with something deeper. This wounded creature bore no resemblance to the threat profiles he'd studied. She was small, delicate, and clearly in pain. Her torn clothing revealed no hidden weapons, no tactical gear, just the simple robes of a civilian. He lowered his rifle. "Where are you hurt?" he asked, switching to basic standard. Vyatia blinked, confusion replacing the resigned acceptance in her expression. "I what?" Kieran set his weapon aside and knelt beside her, pulling a med scanner from his pack. "Your injuries? Let me see." "You're not going to." She gestured weakly at his rifle. "No." His voice was gentle but firm. "You're not a threat anymore. You're just hurting." The scanner revealed internal bleeding and to cracked ribs. Without hesitation, Kieran retrieved a pain suppressor from his kit. Vyatia flinched as he approached, but didn't pull away. Her skin was warm under his gloved hands as he carefully pressed the device to her side. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're kind. You're supposed to be executioners." Kieran met her gaze as the suppressor took effect, watching some of the tension leave her features. "Maybe some are, but I'm not here to kill wounded civilians." For the first time since he'd found her, Vyatia's expression softened. Something shifted in the space between them, a crack in the wall of species-wide hatred that had driven this war. As if summoned by their moment of connection, the wind began to pick up, carrying the scent of an approaching dust storm. Kieran glanced at the darkening sky, then back at the injured Zalari. Before him, "Can you walk?" he asked. Vyatia tested her weight against the pillar and nodded slowly. "I think so." "Good. We need to find better shelter." He helped her to her feet, surprised by how naturally she leaned into his support. "The storm's going to be bad." As they moved deeper into the temple ruins, Vyatia glanced up at the human who had chosen mercy over duty. In the gathering twilight, Kieran Vale had become something she'd never thought possible, her protector rather than her executioner. The first rumble of thunder echoed across the scorched landscape, and with it came the promise of a long night ahead. The dust storm hit with the fury of a wounded beast, howling through the temple ruins with enough force to strip paint from metal. Kieran had found them shelter in what appeared to be an inner sanctum, its stone walls thick enough to muffle the worst of the wind's rage. Emergency lighting from his pack cast dancing shadows on ancient carvings that depicted scenes of peace between different species. Ironic, given their current situation. Viatia sat against the far wall, her pale purple skin almost luminescent in the artificial light. The pain suppressor had done its work, but exhaustion still lined her delicate features. She watched Kieran warily as he activated a small heating unit, the device's soft hum joining the storm's symphony. "What is your name?" she asked suddenly. Her accented standard more confident now that the immediate threat of death had passed. "Kieran," he replied, not looking up from his equipment. "Kieran Vale." "Kieran," she repeated, testing the unfamiliar syllables. "I am Viatia, though I suppose your intelligence already told you that." He glanced at her, noting the way she pronounced her name with a slight musical trill that his tongue couldn't quite replicate. "They said you were a high-value target, an insurgent leader." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "I am a curator, Kieran Vale. I preserve art and cultural artifacts." She gestured to a small satchel beside her. "I was trying to save what I could before your bombardment destroyed everything." Kieran's hands stilled on his pack. "A curator? The Zolari have been on this moon for 3,000 years. Our temples, our history, our songs, all of it burning because of this war." Her voice carried a weight of loss that transcended species barriers. "I couldn't let it all disappear." The heating unit finally activated, spreading warmth through the small chamber. Kieran pulled out two ration packs, offering one to Viatia. She accepted it hesitantly, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Her skin was softer than he'd expected, almost silk-like despite the cuts and bruises. "Why didn't you evacuate with the others?" he asked, settling across from her but keeping a respectful distance. Viatia opened the ration pack with careful movements, wincing slightly as her ribs protested. "Someone had to stay. Someone had to try." She took a small bite, her expression showing surprise at the food's palatability. "What about you? Why show mercy to an enemy?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment, listening to the storm rage outside. "You weren't an enemy. You were just hurting and afraid." He met her eyes. "I've seen enough death, Viatia. Sometimes choosing not to kill is the braver choice. Your superiors won't see it that way. Then they don't have to know." The words surprised him as much as her. "As far as they're concerned, I'm tracking a fugitive through a dust storm. Could take days to find anything in this mess." Viatia studied his face, searching for deception, and finding none. "You would risk your career for a stranger?" "I'd risk it for someone who's trying to save beautiful things in an ugly war." Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the armor of mistrust that had kept her species apart from his. She moved slightly closer, drawn by the warmth of both the heater and his unexpected kindness. "Tell me about these artifacts," Kieran said, nodding toward her satchel. "What were you trying to save?" Viatia's eyes lit up, and for the first time since he'd found her, she smiled. It transformed her face completely, revealing the beauty that war and fear had hidden. "Song crystals. Mostly. They contain the musical histories of my people, lullabies, victory chants, love songs that date back millennia." As the storm continued its assault on the temple, Viatia began to hum one of the ancient melodies. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, vibrating through the stone walls and somehow making the violent wind outside seem less threatening. Kieran found himself leaning closer, captivated by both the music and the woman creating it. "That's beautiful," he whispered when she finished. "It's a song of hope," she replied softly. "My mother used to sing it to me when I was frightened." "Are you frightened now?" Viatia looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the enemy uniform to the gentle soul beneath. "Not anymore," she admitted. "Not with you." The admission hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside their small sanctuary, something warmer than the heating unit was beginning to bloom. As the hours passed, they shared stories of their worlds, their families, their dreams beyond the war. With each exchanged word, the distance between them shrank, until enemy and soldier became simply two souls finding unexpected connection in the midst of chaos. When Viatia finally dozed against the wall, Kieran found himself watching over her sleep with the protectiveness of a guardian, rather than the vigilance of a captor. The storm would pass, he knew, but whatever was growing between them felt like it might weather any tempest. Dawn came slowly through the storm's dying fury, painting the sanctum in shades of amber and gold. Viaisha stirred as the first rays filtered through cracks in the ancient stonework, her dark curls catching the light like shadows made silk. She found Kieran already awake, his back against the wall, watching her with that expression she couldn't quite decipher. "You stayed awake all night," she observed, her voice still soft with sleep. "Someone had to keep watch," he replied, though they both knew the real reason. In sleep, her defenses had fallen away completely, leaving her vulnerable in a way that made his chest tighten with unfamiliar protectiveness. The heating unit had dimmed to conserve power, but the space between them felt warmer now. Viaisha shifted, wincing as her ribs reminded her of their condition. Without hesitation, Kieran moved to her side. "Let me check your wounds," he said gently. "The pain suppressor should be wearing off soon." Viaisha nodded, allowing him to help her into a better position. As his hands worked with practiced efficiency, she studied his face, the strong jawline, the concerned furrow of his brow, the way his eyes focused completely on her well-being rather than her alien features. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. "What others?" "The humans in the propaganda feeds. They always showed your kind as cold, mechanical, killers without conscience." She caught his hand as he reached for another medical scanner. "But you have gentle hands." Kieran's breath caught at the contact. Her fingers were long and elegant, her pale purple skin marked with intricate natural patterns that resembled delicate lacework. "Maybe the propaganda was wrong about both our species, perhaps." Viaisha's thumb traced across his knuckles. "I was taught that humans felt no empathy for other life forms, that you conquered and consumed without thought for beauty or culture. And what do you think now?" She looked up at him, their faces closer than they'd been before. "I think you're trying very hard to preserve something beautiful in the middle of all this destruction." The scanner beeped softly, indicating her injuries were healing well. But neither of them moved away. In the growing light, Kieran could see the full extent of her ethereal beauty, the way her dark curls framed her face, the subtle iridescence of her skin, the depth of emotion in her large eyes. "Viaisha," he said carefully, "when this storm passes, when my unit finds us, what happens then?" "I don't know." Her honesty was both refreshing and terrifying. "I should be afraid, should be planning escape or resignation to death. But with you." She trailed off, searching for words in a language that wasn't her own. "With me, with you, I feel safe for the first time since this war began. I feel like someone sees me as more than just an enemy to be eliminated." Kieran's hand moved to cup her face, his thumb tracing the elegant line of her cheekbone. "You're not my enemy, Viaisha. I don't think you ever were." The admission hung between them like a sacred vow. Viaisha leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as she savored the gentleness she'd never expected to find in human hands. "Show me," she whispered. "Show you what?" "Show me that not all touch has to hurt." Kieran's heart hammered against his ribs as he understood her meaning. Slowly, reverently, he let his other hand join the first, framing her face as if she were made of precious crystal. Viaisha's eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze with trust that humbled him. "Are you sure?" he asked. Instead of answering with words, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, a question asked and answered in the language of touch. When she didn't pull away, Kieran deepened it slightly, marveling at the way she fit against him despite their different origins. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. Viaisha's natural patterns seemed to glow more brightly, and Kieran wondered if it was a sign of emotion or simply the way the light caught her skin. "I never thought," she whispered against his lips, "that I could feel this way about someone from another world." "Neither did I," he admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "But here we are." "Here we are," she agreed, a small smile playing at her lips. Two fools falling for each other in the middle of a war. Outside, the storm continued its retreat, but inside their sanctuary, a different kind of tempest was just beginning. As Viaisha settled more comfortably against Kieran's chest, both of them knew that whatever happened next, they'd found something worth fighting for each other. The ancient carvings on the walls seemed to approve. Their depicted scenes of interspecies harmony no longer seeming like impossible dreams, but like prophecies waiting to be fulfilled. The storm's retreat left an almost ethereal silence in its wake, broken only by the gentle drip of water from the temple's ancient eaves. Viaisha had fallen asleep against Kieran's chest, her breathing deep and peaceful for the first time since he'd found her. He held her carefully, afraid to disturb the trust she'd placed in him, watching the play of light across her pale purple skin. When she stirred, it was with a languid grace that made his breath catch. Her dark curls had escaped their constraints, framing her face in wild beauty. She looked up at him with eyes that held none of yesterday's fear-only warmth and something deeper that neither of them dared name yet. "The storm is passing," she observed softly, though neither of them moved to separate. "Yes," Kieran's voice was rougher than usual. "My unit will be looking for me soon." The reality of their situation settled between them like a cold wind. Viaisha's expression grew troubled, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest through the fabric of his uniform. "What will you tell them about me?" "I don't know yet." The honesty was painful but necessary. "I won't let them hurt you, Viaisha. Whatever happens, I promise you that." She lifted her head to study his face, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she reached up to touch his cheek with the same gentleness he'd shown her. "You would risk everything for me." "I would risk everything for you," he confirmed without hesitation. The admission broke something open between them. Viaisha's eyes filled with tears she couldn't shed. Zalari physiology didn't allow for human-style crying, but the emotion was no less real for its different expression. "I have something to confess," she whispered. "When I saw you yesterday, when you first found me, I wasn't just afraid of dying. I was afraid of dying alone, forgotten, with no one to remember that I had tried to save something beautiful." Kieran's arms tightened around her. "You're not alone now." "No," she agreed, her voice growing stronger. "I'm not." What happened next felt as natural as breathing. Viaisha's lips found his again, but this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. The kiss deepened as weeks of loneliness and fear transformed into something entirely different: desire, connection, the desperate need to feel alive in a galaxy that seemed determined to destroy everything beautiful. Kieran's hands moved to the fastenings of her torn robes, his touch reverent as he revealed more of her ethereal skin. The natural patterns he'd glimpsed before were even more intricate than he'd imagined, covering her shoulders and arms like living art. Where his fingers traced, the patterns seemed to pulse with soft bioluminescence. "You're beautiful," he breathed against her throat, feeling her pulse quicken under his lips. Viaisha's response was to help him remove his own uniform shirt, her elegant hands exploring the differences between their anatomies with curious wonder. His skin was warmer than hers, more roughly textured, but she found beauty in the contrasts. "So different," she murmured, her palm flat against his chest, "but somehow perfect." They moved together with increasing urgency, two souls finding solace in physical connection. When Viaisha's natural patterns flared brighter, Kieran understood. It was her body's way of expressing the depth of her emotion. He matched her intensity, showing her through touch what words in any language couldn't adequately convey. In the ancient sanctum, surrounded by carvings that spoke of peace between species, they found their own harmony. Viaisha's soft gasps mixed with Kieran's deeper groans as they moved together, creating a music more beautiful than any of her preserved songs. Afterward, they lay entwined on his thermal blanket, Viaisha's head on his shoulder, their breathing gradually returning to normal. The patterns on her skin had settled into a soft, steady glow that Kieran found hypnotic. "What does the light mean?" he asked quietly, tracing one of the more intricate designs with his fingertip. "Emotion," she explained, shivering slightly at his touch. "The brighter they glow, the more intense the feeling. It's not something we can control. So right now, you're feeling content, safe," and she hesitated, then met his eyes. "Loved. I feel loved." Kieran Vale. The words hit him like a physical blow. Love. He hadn't dared name the emotion growing between them, but hearing her say it made everything clear. "I love you too," he said simply. "I know it's impossible, I know it's insane, but I love you." Viaisha's patterns flared brighter, and she pressed closer to him. "Not impossible, just complicated." Their moment of peace was shattered by the distant sound of aircraft engines. Kieran's unit was approaching, and with them came the end of their sanctuary. Vaisha tensed in his arms, but he held her steady. "Whatever happens," he said firmly, "remember this moment. Remember that we found something beautiful in all this ugliness." "I will," she promised, her voice already carrying the weight of impending separation. "I'll remember." As the engines grew louder, they held each other tighter, knowing that the real test of their impossible love was about to begin. The dropship's engines thundered overhead, sending debris scattering across the temple ruins. Kieran and Vaisha had dressed hastily, but the intimacy of their connection still lingered in the air between them like a tangible thing. Her patterns had dimmed to their normal state, but Kieran could see the tension in every line of her body as boots crunched on rubble. Outside their sanctuary, Sergeant Vale. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Torres, his second in command. "Report." Kieran squeezed Vaisha's hand once, then stepped toward the entrance. "Here, Lieutenant. I found the target." Torres appeared in the doorway, rifle ready, followed by two other soldiers. His eyes immediately locked onto Vaisha, who had positioned herself non-threateningly against the far wall, hands visible and empty. "Single Zalari female, wounded," Torres observed, his weapon trained on her. "Looks like you had her cornered all night. Good work." "She's not combative," Kieran said carefully. "Injuries required medical attention." "Understood." Torres nodded to his men. "Cuff her and prep for transport. Command wants her alive for interrogation." "Wait." Kieran stepped between his men and Vaisha. "She's not military. She's a civilian, a cultural preservationist." Torres lowered his rifle slightly, eyeing his sergeant with new interest. "Come again?" "She's a curator, Lieutenant. She was trying to save artifacts from the bombing. Not exactly enemy combatant material, Sergeant," Torres said slowly. "Our orders were to eliminate or capture a high-value target. The brass doesn't care about her hobbies." Vaisha watched the exchange with growing alarm, her patterns beginning to flicker despite her efforts to remain calm. Kieran could see the fear creeping back into her eyes, not fear of death, but fear of separation, of losing this fragile connection they'd built. "Sir," Kieran said, his voice taking on the formal tone of a respectful subordinate challenging his superior, "I'm recommending we treat her as a non-combatant requiring medical evacuation, rather than a prisoner of war." The silence that followed was deafening. Torres studied his sergeant's face, noting the protective stance, the way Kieran's eyes kept flicking to the alien woman behind him. "You want to explain that recommendation, Sergeant?" Kieran's jaw tightened. "She's injured, sir, alone, and she's been nothing but cooperative. Treating her as a prisoner would be excessive." "Excessive." Torres repeated the word flatly. "Kieran, what happened out here?" Before Kieran could answer, Vaisha stepped forward. Her movements were graceful despite her injuries, and she addressed Torres directly and carefully pronounced standard. "Lieutenant Torres, I am Vaisha of the Zalari Cultural Preservation Society. I am not a soldier. I have no weapons, no tactical information, no value to your military beyond what your Sergeant Vale has already observed." She gestured to her satchel. "I have only tried to save some small pieces of my people's heritage before they were lost forever." Torres looked between them, his expression unreadable. "And you just happened to be in the middle of a war zone doing archaeology. Someone had to try," she said simply. "Someone had to remember." Something in her tone must have reached him, because Torres's stance relaxed slightly. "Show me." Vaisha moved slowly to her satchel, withdrawing one of the song crystals. Even in the dim light, it sparkled with inner beauty, its faceted surface catching and reflecting the rays filtering through the temple. 3,000 years of music," she said softly. "Lullabies, celebration songs, epic ballads. All of it would have been lost in the bombing." Torres took the crystal, turning it over in his hands. "It's beautiful," he admitted grudgingly. "It's what I was trying to save when your sergeant found me," Vaisha continued. "I was not fighting your war, Lieutenant. I was trying to preserve something that transcends it." Kieran watched his superior's face, seeing the moment when military pragmatism began to war with basic human decency. Torres handed the crystal back to Vaisha with careful respect. "Medical evacuation." he said finally. She'll need to be processed, but as a civilian rather than a combatant. Relief flooded through Kieran so powerfully he nearly swayed. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Torres's expression was grim. Command isn't going to be happy about this. They wanted a trophy, not a refugee. I'll handle command, Kieran said firmly. As the soldiers began preparations for departure, Kieran found himself alone with Viaisha for what might be the last time. Her patterns were pulsing with a mixture of hope and fear. What will happen to me? She asked quietly. I don't know, he admitted, but I'll find you, Viaisha. Whatever facility they take you to, whatever process they put you through, I'll find you. She reached up to touch his face one last time, her cool fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Promise me something, anything. Promise me that if we never see each other again, you'll remember that there was beauty in this war. That too, people from different worlds found something worth preserving. Kieran caught her hand, pressing it firmly against his cheek. I promise. But we will see each other again. This isn't over, Viaisha. What we found, it's stronger than any war. The boarding call came then, separating them physically but not spiritually, as Viaisha was helped onto the dropship with the care to a wounded civilian, rather than the restraint of a prisoner. She looked back at Kieran one last time. Her patterns flared bright, enough to be seen through the ship's viewport, a message of love and hope that transcended the need for words. Kieran touched his chest where her hand had rested, feeling the phantom warmth of her touch. The dropship lifted off, carrying her away from him, but not from his heart. As it disappeared into the scorched sky, Kieran made a silent vow. He would find her again. He would navigate the bureaucracy, the politics, the species barriers, whatever it took. Because in a galaxy torn apart by war, they had found something worth fighting for, each other, and the possibility of peace that their love represented. The war might have brought them together, but love would keep them connected across any distance, any obstacle, any force that tried to tear them apart. In the ancient temple ruins, where carvings of interspecies harmony looked down with stone approval, Kieran Vale began planning his next mission not as a soldier, but as a man who had touched the gentle soul of peace in the midst of endless conflict.